Coming-of-age movies like Stand By Me and Boys in the Hood only wish they could have the "do you want to see a dead body" element the way Deadgirl does. You'll never have anything better. When high school misfits Ricky and JT decide to ditch school and find themselves lost in a crumbling facility of a nearby abandoned hospital, they come face to face with a gruesome discovery. A body of a woman stripped naked, chained to a table, and covered in plastic. And they soon realize she's anything but dead. Quickly, the boys find themselves embarking on a twisted yet poignant journey through testing the limits of their friendship, and forces both to decide just how far they're willing to stretch their understanding of right and wrong. Deadgirl is a 2008 indie horror film directed by Marcel Sarmiento and Gadi Harrell. The premise: two teenage boys skip school, stumble upon an abandoned asylum, and discover a naked, undead woman strapped to a gurney. One wants to use her, the other watches. So, welcome to Who Would Like That? Today we're covering Deadgirl, and yes, I would say just out of the gate, this movie certainly deserves to be on this list. So we'll discuss it and see whether or not I feel this film has artistic merit. To the critical reception. Its reception reflects a sharp split between those who see it as disturbing exploitation and those who argue it holds a mirror to toxic male adolescence and societal rot. The film landed like a rotten tomato at a film fest. It was slammed by most critics for being exploitative, misogynistic, and juvenile, but also weirdly defended by some who argue it's a twisted coming-of-age allegory about toxic masculinity, repression, and the moral decay of modern youth. Deadgirl holds a very low approval rating at 33%, with most reviews pointing to its disturbing premise and perceived lack of depth. Common complaints include exploitative and misogynistic. Many saw the film's premise, two teen boys discovering a naked, undead woman in an asylum and deciding to use her as a sex slave, as inherently offensive and morally bankrupt. Critics accused it of relying on provocation rather than building a meaningful narrative or moral framework. Especially the leads, who are often seen as too repugnant or poorly developed to anchor any meaningful exploration of anything. That's not to say that the film isn't completely hated. There is some academic and some fan appreciation. Some viewers, especially in academic or underground horror circles, defend Deadgirl as a metaphor for teenage male repression and dehumanization. The titular Deadgirl becomes a literal object, reflecting the way young boys are often socialized to treat women as trophies or playthings. A commentary on complicity and inaction. One boy resists but doesn't act, the other embraces abuse. This split has been read as damning portrayal of moral cowardice among passive bystanders. Some argue that Deadgirl isn't endorsing its characters, it's exposing how toxic masculinity festers when left unchallenged in teenage peer groups.
You see that?
Yeah, I see that. I can't fucking miss that. There's enough fucking cottage cheese spilling out there to feed Ethiopia.
No, bro, it ain't that bad.
You have to remember that this movie is close to 20 years old as of me recording this. And if there's anything at the forefront of what media is trying to ask questions about, if only recently the Netflix series Adolescence, there's a very clear issue with young men and toxic masculinity and how they're dealing with things. A bit over the edge, but not unlike Adolescence. There's a similar message there that young men aren't properly exploring their feelings. It's very hard to defend this movie's messaging because they go so far over the edge and don't really challenge you the way I feel like the movie wants to. But there is something to be said here because it's a topic that we're quite familiar with at this point. That message is certainly up for debate. A bold concept with allegorical potential. The central premise, while grotesque, could be interpreted as a bold critique of adolescent male objectification and the violence it breeds. There isn't really a model citizen. It's these kids that are like hanging out with each other. They're kind of the castaways in the school, and then you have the jocks, the bullies at the school who are like cartoon versions.
Fuck! Oh.
Johnny,
Nobody looking at my woman,
Johnny!
you miserable little shit! Got that?
Johnny, stop. That's enough. Okay, I want to go home.
Come on, baby. I'm just defending your honor over here.
In the end, this movie basically says all these guys are the same, what is the audience supposed to take as a counter to the way things are handled? I could even argue that some of the female characters in this aren't great model citizens. You have the woman at the gas station who's interested in buying drugs, but is quite foolish about it.
Don't be trying to pass off no oregano on me, you little motherfuckers. What's wrong with your buddy here? Slow or something?
What's the matter with you, boy? You too stupid.
Manages to get away and is actually stronger than these boys. I guess that could be something of a message that these boys, when it comes to handling a zombie, they have all the power, especially when the zombie's chained up. When it comes to trying to trick a woman, they get overpowered, even though they have the numbers. So I guess there's something there to say that, yeah, these characters, these aren't strong boys. And I think the execution could have been done better. From a technical aspect, the cinematography doesn't really compel much visually. There's not much color in this movie, and I assume that's on purpose, but there's a deliberate grunginess and decaying aesthetic that reflects the moral rot of its characters. It's not pretty, but it's consistent. Constant shaky cam. I'm not a fan of it to begin with. I realize that it certainly is a tool for certain cinematographers to give you that unease, that realness, but I don't want to feel like I'm on a boat at sea watching things. Constant whips. This isn't that kind of movie where things need to be moving like that with the camera, and it's just an unappealing image, just outright, which again is kind of the point. Just a lot of muted grays, stale whites and browns, just unappealing in every sense of the form, and the cinematography certainly does no favors for this. As far as the script is concerned, the writing is not great. Something about movies like this that appear to have one thing that they're trying to challenge the audience on. I don't know if they're trying to make these teenagers relatable. If anything, it just seems like all the characters in this movie are, well, at least all the male characters are kind of abhorrent. Which leads me to this question. Who is the protagonist of this movie? Some could argue that it's Ricky, the child of a divorced family who has something of a scummy mother's boyfriend. We never really see him interact with his mother, but we do see Ricky interact with that guy from Lost, who basically played the same character on Lost. I think we're supposed to relate to him. However, so Ricky is smitten for this girl, Joanne, who's dating one of the jocks. And I sure hope this isn't relatable when they show him daydreaming about being with her, that what he daydreams about is getting head. I mean, yeah, when you're that age, you have thoughts like that. But when a guy is trying to convince, I don't know, the character and us, the audience, that he loves this girl, don't show us just him lusting. Like, it's an odd choice. It's an odd choice to have him daydream about getting head. Not even daydream about kissing or, enjoying a movie or a night out at the pool hall. Just daydream about head, because that's love. As much as I want to defend this movie, the way it goes about showing us what it's trying to say is just no, bad movie. Bad. Ricky is that of a reluctant bystander. An alienated, unpopular teenager, Ricky pines for a classmate named Joanne and generally serves as the conscience of the duo who discovers the dead girl. He doesn't fully participate, but crucially, he doesn't stop it either. Why? He's the audience surrogate. He reacts with initial horror, as most viewers would. He wrestles with guilt and moral paralysis, caught between peer pressure, sexual frustration, and a weak sense of decency. He does not emerge heroic. If anything, he ends up tragically complicit. Is JT the protagonist? If anything, JT could be the antagonist, the embodiment of toxic impulse. More aggressive, impulsive, and seemingly sociopathic. Once he realizes the dead girl doesn't die, he sees her as an opportunity. Not meant to be relatable, but disturbingly charismatic in a way that challenges the viewer. He represents what happens when dark fantasies aren't restrained by morality or empathy. Maybe the protagonist is the dead girl herself? Which, by the way, do we not want to talk about why there's just a random corpse covered in plastic in an abandoned hospital? Why is that irrelevant? The dead girl is the object of projection. She's nameless, mute, and literally dehumanized, serving as a blank slate for the boys' projections, frustrations, and violations. Some argue that the horror of Deadgirl is seeing how easily the audience might also reduce her to symbol instead of a character. Not relatable, but she functions as a moral barometer. The less we feel for her, the more we realize how numb we become as viewers. So how does this film test your morality? How indeed? This is something of a Rorschach test. If you relate to Ricky and feel sick about his inaction, this film might be working as intended. If you see JT as just being real, the film might be critiquing you. The word might is doing some work here. If you don't see anyone you relate to, the film could be pointing to a void. The absence of anyone to look to is part of the horror, or I would say you've grown up past adolescence or know how to socially interact with people. For all intents and purposes, the protagonist of this film is Ricky. Ricky's arc is similar to what happens in films like Funny Games and Come and See, where the protagonist's helplessness become a trap for the audience. But unlike those films, Deadgirl doesn't give you the comfort of a clear stance or redemption. That's arguably why so many people reject it. It doesn't let you off the hook. If I may, there's a way you could probably get intent out to the audience if you just alter what Ricky does in this movie. Instead of walking away, stammering excuses, or just turning away in silence, Ricky can make a choice definitively early on. He frees the girl, undead or not, smashing the restraints, fending off JT, and dragging her into daylight. Or he puts her out of her misery properly, acknowledging that she's been reanimated into something non-human, but choosing to end her suffering with mercy and finality. This would shift Ricky from a bystander to an actor, and in doing so would change the film Deadgirl from a film about male depravity to one about moral courage in the face of social rot. Even if Ricky fails or dies, his action provides counterpoint to the film's nihilism, a reminder that decency is possible even if punished. It could have visually been framed differently as well. A horror set piece reimagined as a liberation scene. The grotesque aesthetic remains, but becomes symbolic of internal struggle. Ricky dragging the dead girl through the rust and rot towards some semblance of dignity. Perhaps Ricky sees his own reflection in her hollow stare, forcing a reckoning with what he might have become. Maybe just telling the police does that too. With a slight alteration, the philosophical impact could be parallel to something like The Nightingale, which doesn't flinch from brutality but forces meaning through character choice. The frustrating thing about Ricky's character is the boyfriend of his mother character that he very clearly has an issue with. You would think that that would inform his character what not to be like. This lack of a father figure plays out in multiple ways. There's no moral compass. Ricky's adrift. His only influence is JT, a peer who thrives on dominance and manipulation. With no adult to model empathy or boundaries, Ricky flounders between knowing right from wrong and having the strength to act on it. Emotional retardation. Without nurturing guidance, Ricky's emotional development is stunted. He craves love with Joanne, use the word love in quotation marks, but has no healthy template for expressing it. So he becomes obsessed, awkward, and ultimately passive. In many coming-of-age films, the father, or surrogate father, provides an ethical spine. In Deadgirl, that vacuum is filled by a sociopath. The issue with this movie is it goes so far over the line that I can recognize some of what it is that the essence of what they're trying to say, but it's kind of silly to assume that if most high school-aged young boys were to have access to a body to take out their frustrations on, I don't think most boys would feel this way or participate in this. It's another problem that I feel this movie just completely misses the mark. Going through some of the dialogue and things that people are saying and doing, it feels like it's written by at least one or two message boards that I've come across. And it just feeds into that narrative. I think, unfortunately, nothing about what happens in this movie is rewarding. If anything, this is just another example of, if boys feel like this, we really need to start speaking to boys. And it sucks saying that because, again, as someone who grew up, there was 2 or 3 years there where I was addicted to being by myself in a room. I can understand that one-track mind and thinking you're in love and it's actually lust and wanting to act sexually. The problem is the way this movie presents the issue is so far over the line. If someone relates to this, how do they come out and say that? So what are the cultural and psychological implications? In broader thematic terms, Deadgirl can be seen as a parable of what happens when boys are left to raise themselves in a world of porn, peer pressure, and unchecked aggression. The film is an indictment of broken masculinity. Ricky's inability to act stems not from evil, but from hollowness. He was never taught how to act, which is ironic considering he was raised by a woman. It reflects a generational failure. Adults are missing in the film, not just physically, but morally. There's no authority, no accountability, and no framework of care. The undead girl becomes a surrogate object for love, sex, power, and rebellion. The things young men are supposed to learn how to handle from someone, but there's no one there. There are other movies that cover fatherless protagonists in a slightly different way. Elephant has total adult absence, and the result is nihilism and senseless violence. Deadgirl has zero adult presence, and the result is complicity, detachment, and emotional ruin. So, in closing, ultimately, Deadgirl is a movie that mistakes its idea of provocation. It has the bones of a dark fable, something like Let the Right One In meets A Clockwork Orange, but instead still feels hollow. Less like a scream in the dark and more like an edgy shrug. If you're looking for a film that challenges you morally and emotionally, you're best off looking elsewhere. This one misses the mark. If you're into the premise but would like to look elsewhere, may I suggest a couple of other films? A Serbian film uses shock to criticize societal hypocrisy. It's more overtly political and satirical, albeit also reviled. The Loved Ones is about teen violence and sexual repression, better structured and thematically focused. Ginger Snaps is about puberty, sex, and a horror blend. A bit more feminist and narratively cohesive. So what about you? Have you seen Deadgirl? Did you read it as a daring metaphor or edgy trash? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment, and all that other jazz. If you're new to this series, I've covered other like-minded films that test boundaries in this series called Who Would Like That? Thank you for taking part in this video. I've been Charles, otherwise known as CPO. Be sure to avoid gurneys in unattended hospitals, and always ask yourself, who would like that?